Leicester don't win the championship.
Wow. Norwich City we've been talking about as a club in crisis a few months ago.
And he just seems to be a bit, I don't know, hit and miss in terms of what he's saying. He's not really convincing me that they're up for the battle.
Hello guys and welcome back to this week's episode of the Sportsman Untitled, and we've got an EFL special for you, and as is the case I'm joined by Gab Sutton. Gab, how are you doing?
I'm really well, thanks Simon, great to be back on, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. We've got Justin here from the Second Tier Podcast. Justin, all good?
Yeah, not bad at all.
Now we've got to talk about some breaking news that's just come out this morning. Tony Mobray requires medical treatment, which means he'll be stepping away from Birmingham City for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Gab, club close to your heart, obviously Birmingham. Obviously, we send Tony our best wishes, but what do you make of this news?
Well, I'd like to echo those thoughts. I think, firstly, thank you to Tony Mowbray, really, because he's done some fantastic work just to sort of unify people again, I think, as well as his managerial ability, which is, I think, very underrated in Championship terms. He's a very reliable Championship manager. He's also brought a bit of warmth and a bit of humour to the football club, and I think it's had a real effect on people. So best wishes to Tony Mowbray. Get well soon, and thoughts with his family at the moment.
Justin, do you think this could affect Birmingham in terms of, you talk about the upturn of form they've had kind of under Mowbray? Do you think this could affect them moving into the next couple of months?
Potentially. It's always going to have an impact. Gab and I were discussing it off camera just before we started recording, and it was one of those where I maybe sort of asked the question, and Gab was quite defiant in that it's probably not going to be the case. And Tony Mowbray's a big character, but I think the squad's capable enough and good enough to at least be chipping away at points anyway. I think the only thing is maybe the momentum that Mowbray was gathering over the past few weeks might slow down a little bit, but I don't think it will impact them overall. I think they're good enough to retain the Championship status, obviously, and obviously I think it's just about maintaining that sort of lower mid-table place that they're in now and seeing where they can go from here. But yeah, it's obviously sad news, disappointing news, but yeah, best wishes to Tony Mowbray.
Let's hope we see him on the touchline again soon. We'll return to the top of the Championship table, where Leicester City suffered quite a shock loss to Middlesbrough this weekend at home. They've got Leeds United to come on Friday night. Gab, is there a chance that maybe, Maresca's promotion party might have to be put on ice?
I don't think so. I think we like to create a little bit of spice and drama on here, but I do think that the points tally that Leicester have accumulated puts them in a fantastic position, and they've given themselves a little bit of leeway. I think they've got an embarrassment of riches. I think even their wide players, Fatawu and Mavididi, they're such threats, aren't they? And I'm very confident Leicester are going to get that title party. Get that champagne on ice.
Do you think they beat Leeds at Ellen Road on Friday night?
Yeah, just a small matter of doing that.
And what about you, Justin? Are you as confident or not quite sure?
No, I'm still confident. I think it's just a case of the narrative of them breaking the points record is probably going to slow down a little bit, but I still think they're good enough to at least have that conversation. But I think they're going to take knocks every now and then. It's probably a more competitive Championship than it's ever been in terms of the top teams being as good as they are, and then teams below the top four are still going to get points because that's the nature of the Championship. But they're a quality side, they're brilliant, they've got an embarrassment of riches, as Gab was saying, and I think it's more of a matter of time of when they get promoted as opposed to if they get promoted.
Do you think fans, the last few months I've seen, some Leicester fans have been a bit critical of Maresca's football, calling it a bit boring? I don't know if winning every week's boring to most football fans. Do you understand that at all?
I understand it. I think being a Derby fan, weirdly, years ago we went through it with the likes of Paul Clement, and it's a case of be careful what you wish for, because Maresca's philosophy is to build slow. It's quite interesting actually tactically how he sets up, because his idea of breaking fast and attacking fast, you lose the ball fast, and he'd rather control the game from the start, from the back, and go from there, which is a fair philosophy. Every single manager's got their own. Liam Rossini does a similar thing with Hull City, so it can come across as boring, but when you're winning every week, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world.
On course for a points record. Go on, Gab.
Yeah, I don't think you can judge fans for having a feeling about how their team plays, and I think everyone has their own individual preferences, and I don't think you can hold too much judgment about that. At the same time, I think you have to recognise that Enzo Maresca has established a clear style of play. He's getting the most out of what is an extremely deep squad that's rich in quality, and that's certainly a big advantage. But I think he's maximising that, and I think you've got to give him some credit.
Certainly. We've got Saints, Leeds, and Ipswich all right in the mix still. It's been this top four for a while. Who's taking your fancy for that second spot as we speak?
It changes every week. I mean, for me, the battle is between Southampton and Leeds, mainly because of the quality that they've got in the back. But then again, Ipswich had a few knockbacks recently. They've recovered. They've won the last 2. They beat Millwall at a canter in midweek last week, and you sort of expect them to keep on going because that's what Kieran McKenna does. But I just think in terms of the momentum, quality, and the players that are available to them, Leeds and Southampton are the 2. Now, between those, I actually have no idea. I know Southampton at the time of recording got a game in hand, but it's like picking between your 2 favourite chocolate bars. It's impossible, isn't it? It's impossible. But at the same time, I think Daniel Farke's got experience of just relentlessly going for a title with Norwich. Now the title might be out of reach, but he's going to do the same thing in terms of getting that second place. So you'd expect it to be in Leeds' hands, but Russell Martin and what he's done with Southampton over the past, since September, it's just been remarkable. So again, it's impossible to split them for me.
Do you know what I find really ironic, though? A few years ago we were talking about Daniel Farke being the sort of catalyst for a new way of playing in the Championship and proving that could bring success with that 18-19 Norwich side. And yet, actually, this year, although Leeds have been brilliant and absolutely all credit to them, the way they play is actually maybe a little bit more direct at times. Not that they're a long ball team by any means, but some of the passing they'll play forward earlier. And actually at Southampton, who are the ones where they just relentlessly keep hold of the ball. And actually when they're ahead in games, I actually feel like they don't actually create that many chances, and they don't give up that many chances either, because they're just so focused on keeping hold of the ball and looking after it. And I'd hate to be an opposing team facing Southampton, because if you've gone a goal down, because they are just so good at keeping hold of the ball, and you tire yourself out trying to chase it, let alone creating a chance from that. So Southampton do look very strong.
I'm not as confident on Leicester as both of you are, and I'm feeling incredibly strong on Leeds, particularly. I mean, I thought their performance at Plymouth was very good as well.
Why are you doubting Leicester?
I think they've been very good. I was looking at their points per game in 2024 actually, and I think they've got the 5th highest compared to I think it's Southampton first and Leeds second. And
is that not situational slightly though, Simon? Like, because they've assembled such a lead?
I understand they've assembled a lead, but I just think if they start to lead, I think the game out on Friday night is huge at Elland Road. I think if they've lost to Borough, then they lose to Leeds. The gap's then down to 6 points, I think, between them and Leeds. I still think it's not as secure for the title as perhaps, certainly it felt at the turn of the year.
Yeah.
But
I was going to say, I think part of that Leicester sort of argument is we've not seen them have to react very often. So it's like, okay, well, if they have a back-to-back defeat, how are they going to recover? How are they going to react? And because they've been so relentless and so good this season, we've not had that trial and error.
I don't know, though, because they had that period where they lost to Leeds and Middlesbrough. I think it was around November time, right? And then they responded with quite a long winning streak. So I get where you're coming from, but I think first of all it's 9 points now. I think a point at Elland Road would be a great result for them.
I agree.
But they are just relentlessly strong against the bottom half sides, and that's what gives me a lot of confidence. Also up top, you've got Jamie Vardy, who's been top goal scorer in the Premier League. You've got Patson Daka, who's a Zambia international. You've got Kelechi Iheanacho, who's a really good false nine, and you've got so many. Tom Cannon they signed for £8 million. He's probably their 4th choice centre forward.
I think maybe I just want some drama at the end of the season. I want a bit of chaos. I don't want them to run away.
You're a penchant for drama, Simon.
I know. Let's talk about the race for the playoffs. Just a load of teams in the mix really for 5th and 6th right now. West Brom and Coventry currently 5th and 6th, but Hull, Norwich being very impressive lately, and Preston arguably not out of the question either. Gab, how do you feel about those playoff chases at the minute?
Well, Norwich, I think, with Josh Sargent, are a completely different proposition. I don't have the exact figures to hand, but with it, when he starts, I think it's something like 2.18 points per game, and then I think when he doesn't start, it's 1.23. Like, it's a massive difference, and I think it's because of the energy and aggression that he brings from the front, which I think it's kind of a bit unique in terms of the level of stamina that he's got, and it makes such a difference to the whole team because it suits the way that David Wagner wants to play, and we've not always seen that this season. So with him, they can get Johnny Rowe back fit. They've got Gabriel Sara, Borja Sainz, a Borja banger, as Talk Norwich City call it. they've got 4 really good players there, and actually Norwich City we've been talking about as a club in crisis a few months ago. In terms of form, they're actually turning it around, and now they're looking like contenders.
Agree with that?
I think so, yeah. I was discussing it recently with my second tier co-host Ryan. It was a case of, because they've got all this attacking talent back at their fold, I think it completely changes dimension of the conversation around them, because they've just got, we go back to August and how brilliant they were in August. They were probably the best team in August because they were so good going forwards, created so many chances, and then Josh Sargent gets injured. There's an over-reliance on Johnny Rowe, Gabriel Sara as well. It became, David Venn became a bit of a hate figure in Norfolk. So I think having those players back at his disposal is going to completely change the picture in where Norwich go. And they do have a solid side as well. I'm not overly convinced by Shane Duffy, amongst others. It seemed like a very slow back line, but there's plenty of attacking quality there to at least get them in the conversation. Which
Brad Hill's on loan at Accrington Stanley, by the way. Get him in the team next season. bit of youthful exuberance in central defence.
Are you both backing the Canaries to make the top 6 then?
Do you know, the issue that I've got with Norwich is I really rate Carlos Corberán at West Brom. I think he's the second best manager in the Championship. And I think Hull have probably the best squad outside the top 4 because they've signed Ryan Giles. I mean, attacking-wise, they've got Carvalho, they've got Zaruri. Philogene was like Neymar vibes, with that goal, deflected goal.
That own goal.
It was an own goal, but it was kind of his. Hull I'm very sweet on, although they had been through a bit of a rough patch with injuries and things like that. So for me, I'd go with West Brom and Hull to round off the top 6.
Yeah, I agree with West Brom. I think Corberán is such a good tactician, and I think with the potential takeover going through in the next couple of weeks, hopefully that's going to change the attitude and mentality around the club from the supporters' perspective. So from doomsday to looking up, it becomes a completely different proposition as well. That 6th place is so hard to call, I think, between the likes of Hull. You've got Norwich as well, and Coventry. We've not mentioned Coventry yet, and Mark Robbins. But again, they're a hard side to call at the moment. For some reason, I've got no logic to back it up, but I'm just not overly convinced by Norwich, but more so convinced by Coventry, sorry, but more so convinced by Norwich. I don't know why. I just think that attack and David Wagner having experience of getting the team into the playoffs and winning it, I think he knows what to do.
I think Norwich have a bit more star quality. I think if you look at Norwich's 4 best players, I think they're probably better than maybe Coventry's 4 best players. I think what Coventry have got is such a unity and togetherness under Mark Robbins. But it's also been a bit of a rebuild season for them because they lost loanees from last season and more importantly, Hamer and Gyökeres. And I think that bit of star quality...
it's a difference in games, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's why I feel like Coventry might just fall short, but so much respect for what Mark Robbins is doing there, but I think they might just fall short this occasion.
It's a very interesting one from a Coventry point of view as well. I think next season is going to be a very exciting season for Coventry in terms of, as you mentioned, the kind of overhauling players. This season was always thought to be a bit of a transition one. Yeah. The fact we're now in 6th and competing feels a bit premature in terms of where we're meant to be in this journey. I think I probably agree with you. Talk about star quality. Hadji Wright's had a fairly decent season, but he's still hit and miss. I think if Ellis Sims starts scoring, he's got 2 in 2. That could make the difference. And then the Callum O'Hare situation, he's probably not going to be at Coventry next season. But I think I'll probably have to agree with you in the battle for the top 6. Without wanting to, pour a bucket of water on the conversation we've just had, is the battle for 5th and 6th a bit pointless? Is it just going to be a 3rd versus 4th playoff final?
I don't think you can say that on one-off games, Simon, because it's anything can happen in those one-off games. So, I think if Hull or West Brom get there, I think they'll feel like they've got a chance in the individual matches.
Yeah, and I think the defensive record going into the playoffs, I think is so key. It's something that I play on quite a lot in terms of how I predict where the playoffs are going to go. I think if you've got a better defensive record, you're probably more likely to come out the other end of it. You look at David Wagner, for example. 0-0 all the way to his playoff win, almost, winning it on penalty shootouts, getting promoted with Huddersfield all those years ago. Coventry and Luton last season were probably the better defensive sides between Sunderland and Middlesbrough. So there's a lot of history and examples of that being the case, and I think that's where I sort of side with West Brom and Corberán a little bit, in that I would probably back him and his ability to be a tactician in those one-off games. That might be.
Also, just to counter that slightly, Wembley feels like a bigger pitch. Yeah. So does that lend itself to actually more expansive teams that look to expand the space a bit, so maybe like a Hull.
Got to get to Wembley though. That's the thing. Got to
Sorry?
get to Wembley.
You've got. If you're finishing in 5th and 6th, you've got to beat probably Leeds or Ipswich over 2 legs, and then one of the others in the final, which I think it seems like a big ask now, but we've seen in those playoff games. You're right. The defensive teams tend to do well. Let's move a bit further down the table and talk about Sunderland and Mick Beale, which is just a situation which seems to kind of take a turn every single week. We saw Trey Hume get substituted off and seemingly get ignored by his manager. Mick Beale then came out and said he didn't see him and he's been a great servant. Justin, how do you think this ends, and what is going to happen at Sunderland?
It's quite weird. The Sunderland hierarchy have had a bit of a weird 12 months. In that sort of last January not signing an Ellis Sims replacement and almost overcomplicating the recruitment of bringing in a number 9. They signed Joe Gelhardt. Couldn't foresee Ross Stewart picking up an injury, and that's absolutely fair enough. But that's where you have a little bit more depth and a bit of better planning potentially, and I think they failed a little bit there. And then there was a lot of speculation around Mobray going into the summer, which was a bit of an odd one because Mobray did a good job. He deserved the opportunity to take Sunderland into the following season without any pressure. And then it's the recruitment all again in the summer where they recruit very heavily on young players, and that's absolutely fine to do, but they still needed a little bit of experience. And then this whole situation with letting Mowbray go and then bringing in Mick Beale, despite an exhaustive process where there were several probably better names in the frame for the role, it just seems a bit odd. And then you've got the fact that Beale hasn't really convinced in any of his jobs yet. Obviously, there was a short period at QPR where he did okay. They were top of the table, but it was only after 15 games, and then how he left was quite ridiculous. And then Rangers, I mean, there's a lot of feedback from Rangers fans about how badly he did. So it's just a sorry situation that the hierarchy I don't think have handled particularly well, even though I think they've got Sunderland in a much better position than they've been in the last sort of 10, 15 years. But this is a key period, I think, in terms of where they go from here, because I would rule them out of the playoffs right now unless Beale can perform a miracle. And you need everything going in your favour to be able to perform a miracle, and he doesn't. And it just seems to be going wrong at every single corner for him. So for me, it's very hard to foresee Beale staying at Sunderland by the end of the season, to be honest with you.
Do you think he was almost written off before he'd even started? Because they're still not that far off it, and it felt like the atmosphere at Sunderland kind of took away any momentum they had.
Well, I don't think Mick Beale is a mug. The coaching career that he had, which was starting on the streets of London and coaching football, and you ending up working alongside Ruggiero Cini at Sao Paulo and working at Liverpool and Chelsea, you don't get handed those things on a silver platter. So clearly we're looking at a very, very good coach. Some of the things people have said, Stephen Gerrard and people like that have said about Mick Beale, I think that he's a really good coach. I think there seems to be a political challenge for him in the jobs that he's had so far, because if you look at the results on paper, and I know how simplistic and a little bit divisive that can be to fans watching on who have certain views, but if you were to just look at the results, QPR he had top of the league at one point when you consider how many problems QPR have got. Rangers, I think he had a very strong win percentage there. And I think at Sunderland, for me, what they need to do is actually tweak their recruitment model. I'm not saying change it completely. It's great that they're no longer, giving 5-year contracts to 33-year-olds. But I do think that they need a little bit of a balance where they finished the game against Plymouth Argyle the other week with Dan Neil was the experienced figure. They had an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old in midfield. Just sign an extra experienced midfielder and maybe an experienced centre-half, and just give yourselves that platform. And I'm not talking about massive wholesale changes to recruitment. It's just 2 or 3 experienced players, because I think that would actually make a difference to the leadership qualities required of Michael Beale, because there's other people who can police the dressing room. Now, I think he has to change a little bit of how he handles himself in the media, and I think he's got to learn quickly if he is going to stay as Sunderland manager. And I don't want to underestimate some of the criticism, but I also think there's a recruitment component to this as well.
I agree with that. I think let's turn our attention to the bottom of the Championship now. I think Rotherham are pretty much dead and buried at this point. But the other 2 teams in the relegation zone currently are showing signs of life, Sheffield Wednesday and QPR. There was, of course, that big win which saw Millwall lose and get dragged further back into it. Are you seriously concerned about Millwall now?
I am, mainly down to all those variables that made him so great under Gary Rowett just don't seem to exist anymore, which is quite staggering, because it's only been a matter of months since he left. Now you could argue that they've been on a bit of a downward spiral since sort of 2023, start of 2023 into this year, 2024. But at the same time, those coaching aspects that made him so good don't exist, and that's a big worry for me. And as well as that, they don't seem to be creating or taking their chances. And I think the experience of Joe Edwards probably is a bit problematic in the situation they're in now, because he's coming out in the media. There's a little bit of feeling sorry for themselves, which at this point you need to be standing up and sort of saying, a little bit of defiance, being a bit more spiky. And he just seems to be a bit, I don't know, hit and miss in terms of what he's saying. He's not really convincing me that they're up for the battle. And that's really where it lends to, because I think there's plenty of players there who are up for the battle, but is Joe Edwards the man to motivate them, get it out of them? I don't think so, because he's only really worked with young players. I know he's worked with Frank Lampard, but again, working with Frank Lampard at the jobs he's had, not particularly convincing. A lot of poor results. So it's a case of, can he motivate that team to get out of the position they're in?
Well, a little bit like I've said with Mick Beale, I do think Joe Edwards' career suggests there's a very good coach there. I think the paradox that comes with clubs that want to have a bit of a change of direction is probably the timing, because I can completely understand how Millwall felt like they'd want to modernise a little bit and try and evolve the way they go about things. At the same time, I think we can all agree in this room that Millwall would be mid-table if Gary Rout was still in charge. Yeah. And so I think there's a timing component where maybe if you bring in Joe Edwards in May, you're giving him a summer to bring in his own players, you're giving him a pre-season to get his ideas across, as opposed to in a fuller way, as opposed to preparing game for game. So I think that's a bit different. And then you're going into the fact that Joe Edwards doesn't have any experience of this situation before and it's all new to him. And then it's starting to feel a bit like too much too soon? So I think we're really going to find out how Joe Edwards can cope in a crisis, which I think you have to call this for Millwall now.
Yeah. 15 games to go. Do you see any other teams getting dragged into it? And do you see QPR or Sheffield Wednesday or both staying up?
I would be more favourable with my argument for QPR than I would be Sheffield Wednesday, just because of the points that Sheffield Wednesday have got to make up. They've got to have a near perfect 14, 15 games for them to stay up, because there'll be teams above them that will get points, and that's going to be the big thing.
It's about 6 points, is it, Justin?
Yeah, it's something like that at the moment. Yeah. But as I say, it's their away form isn't great. The home form is good since Danny Royle came in, but at the same time the pitch is falling apart. So can Danny Royle really implement what he wants to do, how he wants to do it? That will ease up as the weather gets better, obviously. But that's going to be a factor. But QPR under Marty Cifuentes, especially over the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks, have been absolutely fantastic. They've been brilliant, and defensively, I don't think they've been particularly improving in terms of shots conceded, or they have, but it's actually the character in how they're defending. It's throwing themselves in front of shots. That hasn't really been present over the last 12 months, and it's such a big factor when you're down there. And it's like you compare them to Millwall, and it's not really happening at Millwall, but it's happening at QPR. So it's that overturn in that mentality, I think, is a big thing. So I think QPR have probably got a better chance. And then you're looking at the likes of Stoke, Swansea. They're probably the two teams that I really worry about. And Huddersfield,
Stoke are bad.
Yeah, they're really
Stoke
poor.
Are really poor.
They're really poor. And I think Stephen Schumacher falls into the same category as Joe Edwards, where he's not been in this position before. Probably needed a summer to get his style of play in, but he's been thrust into a situation where actually he needs to change how he manages a team.
On QPR, I've got a bit of an assertion for you guys, which you can either agree with or challenge. If Ipswich don't get into the top 2 and QPR stay up, I think Marty Cifuentes has a shout for manager of the season. What do you reckon?
It's a fair argument. I mean, he's had to change his style of play from Gareth Edwards to Gareth Edwards, Gareth Ainsworth to that long ball direct style to playing it a little bit more, passing it around, put it plainly. And he's had to motivate the players as well. So, I think it's a good shout. I think what he's done over the past sort of 3 or 4 months has been brilliant.
I think even if Ipswich don't go up, if they finish in the top 4 with 80 points, I think for a newly promoted team that is unbelievable.
It is unbelievable, but I also think that what Kieran McKenna has in his favour is probably the structure at Ipswich being so strong, whereas QPR are a very chaotically run club that's got financial, structural, cultural issues that he's had to challenge whilst evolving the style, as Justin mentioned, and getting results. And I think that's the mark of a coach, if you can implement your ideas with personnel that you wouldn't necessarily choose. That's absolutely fantastic.
There's also a shout for Danny Roll if he keeps Wednesday up. I'd put his name forward, given the shocking start they had.
Worst start in Championship history, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's terrible.
So, they've got a shout now.
Right, guys, we're now going to look at a tweet that came from the Sportsman but wasn't done by me, listing the top 10 players in the Championship this season in no particular order. We've got Somerville, Whittaker, Dewsbury Hall, Ampadu, Sheaf, Adam Armstrong, Jack Clark, Rowe, Morsey and Schmodix. Now, I want to get your selections on who you think's been missed off the list. Who are the shockers for this one, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, emphasis on no particular order there. I think Jayden Philogene would be my big absentee from that list. He's been so good for Hull this season. He had a bit of a problem, or a bit of an injury problem at a point in the season, but actually he's been unlucky that Morgan Whittaker, Chris Somerville have been so fantastic, because as a wide player, Jayden Philogene's probably been up there as one of the best, and Jack Clark as well.
Completely agree.
And then you talk about individual ability. I mean, with the influx of signings that Hull have made, he's moved out to the right, where he's been better on the left so far this season, but he's moved out to the right and still been fantastic. And then we don't have to mention anything other than the Rabona goal, quote unquote own goal, however you want to think about it. But for a player to have the audacity to even try that tells you his confidence this season. He's been fantastic.
A Rabona own goal would be a bit of a comical one, wouldn't it? Misplayed clearance.
See if any defender can match that. Gab, any names missing for you?
Well, I think for me, Kyle Walker-Peters at Southampton. I know his number. Normally for fullbacks, you look for assists and the big numbers. But I think because he's an inverted right back, I think it means that he's kind of more drifting into the midfield areas, and he's such an intelligent footballer. I think sort of Europa League kind of level. So for me, I rate him very, very highly. And I'd probably go for Somerville or Reuter at Leeds, maybe just over Ethan Ampadu. That's personal preference, but Ampadu's been great as well. And I'd have Harry Winks at Leicester.
Of course, can't just fill it with Leicester players. I think also a mention worthy is Leif Davis, after all his assists and attacking play this season. Probably going to strike up a partnership with Kiefer Moore as the season finishes. I
think that's a scary thing. You look at, if you go back to the Cardiff season where Ryan Giles was on loan at Cardiff and Kiefer Moore was there, Giles was brilliant in terms of putting the ball into the box for him, and Kiefer Moore will eat anything. And Leif Davis has so far done that with George Hurst and Connor Chaplin and other players in the box. His delivery is fantastic. So when you've got a target like Kiefer Moore, he's only going to get better. And I mean, just his consistency as well. Come up from League One, doing it in League One, and then to do it in a Championship where he's probably had his breakout campaign at this level, because he's not really convinced so far in loan spells at Bournemouth and obviously at Leeds as well. But he's been superb this season. Definitely deserves a shout.
Right, we're going to try something a little different now. We're going to do a Championship five-a-side draft between Gab and Justin. So we're going to have a goalkeeper on each team and 5 outfield players, but the rules are this. So obviously you can't have the same players in each team. Once a player's gone, they are gone. And also, to spice things up a little, once a team has been picked, so a player from a team, say Dewsbury Hall's been picked, you're not allowed any Leicester players. It's one player per team across both teams. We'll see what teams you come up with and put them on social media, and you can vote for your favourite. You know what, Justin, I'm going to let you start.
I don't want to take Leicester off the table just yet, so I'll see where Gab goes with that. So I'll go with Alex Palmer as my goalkeeper. I mean, the amount of clean sheets he's kept for West Brom. Gordon's done a lot of that in terms of how he sets up his tactics, but you've got to be a good shot stopper to be able to do that. So
I'm going to make some notes.
Yeah.
Just so I don't
these
forget.
down, because I'll definitely forget myself. Alex Palmer's my goalkeeper. Do you want me to go through the rest of them, or do you want to?
No, we'll do one and then one.
You'd be hogging all the time.
There we go.
Nice try, mister. So for me, I'm going to go with Victor Johansson at Rotherham United. Not been a great season for the Millers collectively, to say the least. But he's for a while he looked to be the one that was keeping them in with a fighting chance, and I think he's a fantastic shot stopper and probably will feel like he's got some long-term prospects for Sweden.
Do you know what? I respect you for picking the team bottom of the league and picking their goalkeeper. I think he's very good. We'll switch it round.
It's a
hipster pick. Yeah. Gab, you can have the next pick and we'll reverse it that way.
I'm going to go for Jacob Greaves at Hull City, because I think if we're playing five-a-side, I like to have defenders who are neat and good on the ball and also versatile. So Greaves has played left-back and centre-back this season. He's left-footed, he's lovely on the ball, he loves to carry it forward. I think he'd be perfect for five-a-side football. So I'm going to go with Jacob Greaves at Hull City.
Yeah, they've taken Hull off the market there, which is frustrating. I'm going to go with Leif Davis at Ipswich. I've already praised him enough, but I'm not opening. I don't want to win my games 5-0. I want to win them 10-9. That's what five-a-side's all about. So I'm going to have Leif Davis as my only defender. His left foot's fantastic, and his ability to pick a pass. And as long as we're not playing board height in this five-a-side game, might be able to chip 1 or 2 in as well.
Love that. Justin, I guess you're moving into midfield now.
I'm going to go with Ben Sheaf. Quite an industrial choice. But if you need legs in a five-a-side team, and Ben Sheaf's got it all. I think the only thing he doesn't do is score enough goals, but we've seen it on occasion that he can hit one. And I know five-a-side goals aren't very big or tall, so in terms of hitting the top corner isn't ideal. But yeah, you need industry in there. I think Ben Sheaf as a ball winner and a runner, he's going to be a perfect choice.
Do you think he plays in the Premier League quite soon?
I would think so, yeah. He's going to follow, I wouldn't say follow the footsteps of Gus Hamer as such, because he's at Sheffield United, and Sheffield United are struggling, but I think Ben Sheaf's got the quality and potential to be a very, very good Premier League player.
Gab?
I'm going to go with Harry Winks at Leicester City, because again, that bit of technical composure, assurance at the base of midfield. I think when Jacob Greaves goes on his little runs forward, I think Harry Winks can drop into central defence as well. Keep it flexible. So yeah, Harry Winks of Leicester City for me.
And next up for you, Gab?
Next up for me, I've got a bit of love for Jorginho Rutter at Leeds United. It's a tough pick to not have someone like Crescencio Somerville, who's been absolutely sublime, but I absolutely love Rutter in the way, whether he plays as a false 9 as he did in the first half of the season, or more 2024 as a number 10. His link-up play, his work ethic, he's so selfless. I think he'd slot into my team perfectly. So Jorginho Rutter.
I'm not going for the big names. I'm going for Sami Szmodics. He's really, really impressed me this season. His finishing has been fantastic, and he comes across as a five-a-side player when he plays, especially in that final third now for Blackburn this season. And as well as that, he's a relentless presser. That was the reason why Greg Broughton brought him into Blackburn, director of football at Blackburn. His pressing, his running stats were a big factor in that. Did well last season, but he's even better this season. He's obviously Championship top scorer now, which is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, for me, it's got to be Sami Szmodics.
Interesting. There's a few big teams left, a few playoff contenders left. Them. So Justin, who are you rounding off with?
I'm going to go Jack Clarke. It's an obvious choice. I'm taking him off the table for Gavin, any other Sunderland player, but I mean, there's plenty to choose from. But Jack Clarke, I mean, his quality speaks for itself this season. He's been superb. His ability to dribble is going to suit any five-a-side game. His technical quality as well is just out of this world.
I'm going to go actually back to defence and pick Kyle Walker-Peters, because I don't think we've had Southampton yet, because he's a universal footballer. I think he could drift into midfield. He's just such an intelligent operator. His spatial awareness is brilliant. His link-up play is great, and I think he can chip in as well. So Kyle Walker-Peters for me, with obviously Winks, Rutter and Jacob Greaves and Johansson.
That's very impressive. I think, Gab, you've got players from Leeds, Leicester and Southampton in your team, so you've done quite well there.
Yeah.
Should we go for a manager to manage this team? From the Championship, you're not allowed to pick the manager of any team you've already named.
Ooh.
So those teams are West Brom, Ipswich, Coventry, Blackburn, Sunderland, Rotherham, Southampton, Hull, Leicester, Leeds.
I'll go Tony Mowbray. I'll take him. I mean, he's going to bring the revels for starters. That's a big thing. And as well as that, he's just a good guy to have around. So as a manager who's going to bring the last set of five-a-side pitch, he's going to be one of them.
Well, seeing as Kieran McKenna is taking the Ipswich, I'm going to go with Marty Cifuentes at Queen's Park Rangers for the reasons that we've discussed earlier in the podcast.
That's very good. I like those two teams. We'll put it out to the public to see who's come out on top there. But it's time for us to move down to League One. And the top of the table there, Derby County in the mix, certainly. Justin, Portsmouth now 6 points clear at the top, but there's game imbalances at the top, which makes it quite difficult to judge at this moment in time. Bolton have 3 games in hand. Portsmouth, Derby, Bolton. Do you think it's 2 to go up automatically from those 3 now?
Probably at this point, yes. I think Bolton have been brilliant and consistent, and they've recruited relatively well over January. I think, being the pessimist Derby fan I am, it's quite hard to see us being consistent enough to get over that line. Obviously, James Collins picking up pretty much a season-ending injury. I think Paul Warne alluded to him being out until April, and the season ends basically in May. So he's basically out for the season, which is a big loss, because he's been relentless in terms of his amount of minutes he's played. And then Portsmouth just seem to keep going. Whenever they hit a sticky patch, they recover quite quickly and they go again, which I think is a brilliant asset to have when you're gunning for promotion. So yeah, I think those 3 teams certainly are the most convincing. I think the other one I would have brought into the mix is Peterborough, but they've really taken on a slump. Talking
of Peterborough, completely out of it now, do you think, Gav?
I'm not going to write them off entirely. It's looking like a lot more of a long shot than it was earlier in the season. I think the thing about Peterborough is they've got a fantastic first 11 that's up there with anyone else in this league, and their front four is absolutely devastating. I think they had a good window in terms of keeping their players fit, and I don't think you could ask too much more of the owner, Darryl McAntony, than that. At the same time, I think in an ideal world they would have liked to have strengthened a bit because they are very light on squad depth, and maybe that could be the thing that hinders them a little bit in terms of their top two prospects. I'd like to think they'll still find solutions and secure their place in the top six.
You were quite keen on Bolton, I think, if I remember from our last chat. Are you still feeling confident on there?
I'm feeling very bullish, Simon. Portsmouth and Bolton were my top two before the start of the season, by the way. I'm just going to get that in there. It was Barrow last time, it'll be... I think what Bolton have got is, we've talked about squad depth and how important that is. Bolton, I think, have done well in the sense that they've addressed the remaining areas that they needed to strengthen in the January window. They brought in Aaron Collins, who brings that bit of link-up play up top that they don't really have elsewhere. They've strengthened the wing-back areas, which I think were really important. They've got another centre-back in that gives them a little bit more leeway if Ricardo Santos gets injured. So I think they've addressed what they need to, and their depth in, especially in midfield and attack, is just so strong. And I see them as a better team than Derby myself. So for me, Bolton finish in the top two.
I know we're throwing it forward a bit here, but if we presume that Derby, that's a mixture of Bolton and Derby. Derby, Portsmouth or Bolton do get promoted. Do we see them having a decent level of success in the Championship with the way the clubs are set up at the moment?
I think Portsmouth are on a good upward trajectory. They've been, I'd say, well run. I know Portsmouth fans might disagree with that, but they've been quite pragmatic. They've not been throwing money at it, and it's been quite a sustained approach. And actually, the way John Massini is playing football, I actually quite enjoy. And it's quite a young, vibrant squad as well at Portsmouth, which might adapt quicker, a bit like Plymouth to the Championship. But I think if you compare it to last season, I don't think the teams going up this season are as good or as not wealthy, but have an embarrassment of riches like Sheffield and say Ipswich and Plymouth do. But yeah, I think I'd be more favourable towards Portsmouth and Bolton, because I think they've got the setup, they've got the sort of the players in their peak years or younger players coming through, whereas Derby, being Derby fan, quite close to it, a lot of old players. It's going to be another transition in the summer because there's a lot of players out of contract that need contracts renewing. It's going to be a bit of another a rebuild job, whether that's in League One or Championship, and it's going to be harder if it's a Championship.
Can you give Derby some love for us, Gav? Because Justin is refusing to do so.
Well, I rate Iron Cashin very highly, even though since he signed his new 4-year deal, his form has dropped a little bit. I rate Max Bird very highly, and I really like Nathaniel Mendes-Lang, and I see them as the three most important players for Derby. At the same time, I do question their recruitment strategy, because it does seem to be centred around who was good in the Championship 5 years ago, so it's quite a surface level recruitment strategy. Whereas what I like about Portsmouth, and a few years ago, Portsmouth's approach was, let's sign players who are experienced enough to handle playing for a club like Portsmouth. Now it's players who are hungry and ambitious enough to play for a club like Portsmouth, and Richard Hughes, as sporting director, has done an incredible job. His instinct has served him really well in appointing John Massini, which seemed like such a risk 13 months ago. So Portsmouth, I think, are set up well for long-term progression, and I would feel similarly about Bolton.
One of the stories of League One is developing near the bottom. 3 wins on the bounce now for Cheltenham Town. This is a team, let's not forget, that went 11 league matches at the start of the season without even scoring a goal. Darryl Clark's gone in there, came in September. If he keeps them up this season, it's surely one of the best managerial turnarounds we've seen, Gab.
Yeah, I think he'd get manager. Well, he should get. I don't think he would get manager of the year, because I think the EFL like to go for their safe picks. But for me, Darryl Clark would get my vote manager of the year if he keeps Cheltenham up, because the confidence was absolutely on the floor. A lot of Cheltenham fans had almost written off the season, and it was about putting in some foundations for League Two next season. That felt like close to an inevitability. So he's given them some belief. He's got them fighting. Liam Sercombe's having a fantastic season for them. I think Cheltenham. I think Cheltenham might do it. I think they might.
They'll have to fend off another team in the relegation zone, Port Vale. Obviously, Darren Moore's come in there. He had a lot of Championship experience. He's signed a 5.5-year contract, which kind of stands out to me. How do you see him playing out at Port Vale? He might be relegated this season. Do you think it's a long-term project for Moore?
It seems it. I mean, to hand out a 5.5 year deal or anything over sort of 3 years to a manager in League 1 and 2 is quite a rare thing. So that's a massive commitment from the Vale owners to do that. I mean, Darren Moore's such a likeable character, it's just a likeable guy, and it's hard to sort of dislike him because of how he puts himself out there. And obviously the way he left Sheffield Wednesday was wrong in my opinion. He should have had the chance to keep them in the Championship. But if you look back at his career, it's quite a peculiar one. He did well at Doncaster to a certain extent, got them on the edge of the playoffs or in the playoffs, and then went to Sheffield Wednesday, and it worked out sort of didn't. It was an interesting. He didn't really convince for the entire season as much as Ipswich did or Plymouth did last season. I think that's a big thing considering their budget and quality of players. So certainly does seem a long-term project, and I think the key thing with Darren Moore is, can he adapt to a squad that he doesn't have the quality players that he had at Sheffield Wednesday to get him out of those tight games. I think that's a big thing. Does he have that at Port Vale that he had at Sheffield Wednesday? Probably doesn't.
Are you surprised he's dropped to the bottom of League One?
Well, I'm more than happy to be in a minority on this one, but my sort of take is I'm not as big a fan of Darren Moore as most people. I can completely see why the common consensus is that it's a fantastic appointment for Port Vale given where he's managed. I think Darren Moore has had certain advantages in the sense that he got a bit of wind early on in his managerial career where he got some momentum coming in at West Brom in the sort of post-Pulis and Pardew era, and he got some sort of life in that period, and then he had the chance to manage them in the Championship. But from then on, that 18-19 West Brom side, possibly the Sheffield Wednesday side last season, probably the Doncaster team as well, I've always felt like they've looked a little bit imbalanced and quite reliant on individual quality. And my worry for Darren Moore is that I'm not sure that he can't rely on the individual quality in the same way now that he's at Port Vale. And I think, as we saw at Huddersfield, he can struggle to get a team creating chances sort of organically when he doesn't have some of the best players in the league. Yeah,
and I think another thing as well that needs to be considered with Darren Moore is he's left when his stock's quite high. So he was sacked at West Brom when they were in the playoffs. Everyone was sort of considering he was wrongly sacked and whatnot, when actually it might have been the right decision at the time. Left Sheffield Wednesday after getting them promoted after an incredible bounce back result again in the playoff semi-final, and obviously an incredible win in the final as well. And then he left Huddersfield, in my opinion, without having the chance to really express himself managerially with the new players with new players that were there. So I think he's always left at sort of almost at the wrong time for him, but maybe the right time for the club.
Kind of why I'm surprised he's ended up at Port Vale. No disrespect to him, he seems to have, as you mentioned, always left the club at the right time, and a great CV. But
maybe he wants a bit of stability. The 5-year contract was probably an attraction after he's kind of didn't get along at Huddersfield. He probably wants to sort of settle down somewhere, which I can understand. And listen, he's clearly got very good people skills, and that's what I will give to him about it. He can make a mark on people, and so listen, good luck to him.
Darren Moore may be in League 2 next season, but at the moment there's a few clubs fighting at the top of League 2, trying to get out of it. Stockport County, we thought were kind of I thought they were looking good for the title, thought they were home and hosed. They've now lost 2 on the bounce, 4-0 loss to Tranmere this weekend.
It's crisis, is it, Simon?
It's not crisis yet, but there's certainly jeopardy at the top of League 2. They're 1 point clear of Mansfield as we speak. What's gone wrong for Chandler? He wasn't too happy after this weekend's defeat, Gab.
No, I feel like back-to-back defeats, I don't really take too much from that. I think they've put themselves in such a good position they can sort of afford to drop points for a couple of games. I'm not overly concerned by it. I think Tranmere Rovers have done that to Notts County. They're very ruthless and potent against possession-based sides because of how they play. So I feel like that sort of thing can happen in a one-off game. Even I look at Luton a few years ago in League 2. They had the odd one-off game where they lost 4-0 at Chesterfield, who ended up going down, or Port Vale, who were sort of near the bottom. So I feel like it can happen, and I don't think we should be too judgmental about it. For me, Stockport win the league.
Love the confidence there. Justin, Mansfield, Wrexham and Crewe kind of hunting them down within 3 points. How do you see League Two's kind of automatic promotion places?
It always gets to a point in League Two where it's too tight to call, which is an interesting one. I think as well, when you've got teams who are managed by Phil Parkinson, Nigel Clough, I think it's Lee Bell at Crewe, isn't it?
Yeah. He's done an amazing job.
Yeah, fantastic job. And this style of football that they're still playing there as well, compared to the likes of Phil Parkinson and Nigel Clough, who are probably a little bit more on the defence side, industrial at times. Lee Bell's going up against two managers who've got championship experience, which is an incredible thing. So I think that's what it's going to make. Their experience in and around that and their budgets as well, I think is compared to the likes of Crewe and teams below them, is huge. So yeah, it's going to make for an interesting sort of end to the season. It's always going to be the case, but Mansfield, especially with that big win against Harrogate, and then you've got Wrexham with their riches, it's quite hard to see them slowing down. But as I say, Crewe doing what they're doing, and Lee Bell doing what he's done since he's come in, he's been fantastic.
Let's talk about Crewe a little bit, Gab. Do you think they can break into those top 3 places, and what makes them so good this season?
I think it's the team spirit and the togetherness, and I think Lee Bell's fostered that with his sort of passion and drive, and also I think his in-game management is really, really strong. So although that I would actually say Crewe are at a relatively, for them, quite an early stage of their stylistic and developmental trajectory, they've actually overperformed in spite of that because of Lee Bell's ability to change games that aren't going his side's way. He'll sometimes put a defender called Luke Offord into midfield and tweak the formation and things like that, and he seems to be really good at that. And it's such a tight-knit group where, I would have considered them to have quite a small squad before the start of the season, and they had a massive injury crisis, and they were still able to find a way in each of these games. And I think it's that togetherness that could get them up there. So, has got them up there. I still think for the top 3, I think we're looking at Stockport, Mansfield and Wrexham as the teams to beat. If Crewe got into the top 7, that would be a sensational achievement.
They're certainly ones to watch in the playoff. We'll have to talk about one of the teams you thought were ones to watch. Gab, here we go. Yeah. 3 defeats on the spin for Barrow, yeah. Pete Wild's Barrow. They've still had an incredible season, are still well in contention to finish in the playoffs, let's not forget. Is there anything to be concerned about at Barrow from your point of view?
I like to give it a lot of time before making too many judgments. Obviously, 3 straight defeats, 2 wins in 11 isn't great. At the same time, I think the bar for the playoffs, a bit like in the Championship, is quite low, and we'll come on to it, I'm sure, the gap between 7th place Harrogate even, and 14th place Newport is 2 points. I mean, that's just absolutely remarkable. So it's obviously a low points bar, so I don't think Barrow, Barrow on 56 points or something like that already, so they only need another 14 points from their remaining 14 odd games.
53 Barrow on.
53, thank you. So not far off. So I still think they're in a great position in terms of sewing up a top 7 spot. But yeah, I think the way they defend, it's quite deep, and I'd like to see them be a little bit more aggressive against the ball when they're defending in that defensive third. They're having a great season, and I back Pete Wild to find the answers.
And Gab touched upon how far the kind of playoff chase goes down, especially with that 7th position in League Two. How much of a factor is it for clubs to have momentum heading into the playoffs and maybe steal a place that they didn't think was available,
Yeah, I mean, go back quite a few years, I remember Reading doing it under Brian McDermott in the Championship, probably sort of 13, 14 years ago, where they were sort of in and around sort of 15th, 16th, and then the turn of the year, they go on this incredible run and they gather that momentum and they end up going up. It's similar with Fulham under Slavisa Jokanovic as well. It does help a lot because your mentality changes. You're probably one of the more confident teams going into it, whereas if you finish 4th in League Two and you're there for most of the season and you've got a big points gap and you're sort of cruising to the end of the season waiting for those playoff games, whereas teams are riding that crest of a wave of emotion, that can really, really be a big difference. Don't get me wrong, you're probably one of the weaker sides coming in because you've been at the bottom of the table for a long time. But the emotion, the camaraderie, togetherness, and momentum is massive.
Justin, I'd like to go to my hot take because I think it follows on really nicely from what Justin's saying there. I actually think Tranmere to get into the top 7 is going to be it could be one to watch, because since Nigel Adkins was handed the permanent job in November, it's been top 3 form from Rovers. And because the points bar is going to be so low in League Two, I still think they've got a squeak. Now they've got to start doing it a bit more against some of those bottom sides, but against possession-based sides and against top sides in the league, they can be so ruthless at cutting teams open. They've got Rob Apter on loan from Blackpool, who's been absolutely sensational this season. Connor Jennings has really defied his doubters as well in that sort of destructive 10 role. You got Walker and Hendry in midfield. So I think Tranmere Rovers could be one to watch, especially with the spirit and positivity that Nigel Adkins has fostered after a tough start to the season.
Incredible hot take there, Gavin.
I know,
That's
yeah.
how we're going to finish.
It's
I
what
love
you've got
the
me
shout.
on for, Simon.
I know. I love that. After a big win, let's back them. Justin, any hot take from you up and down the EFL that you want to put forward?
I think the only one I would suggest is Ipswich don't win in the playoffs if they finish in the playoffs. If they miss out on the top two, I don't think they win in the playoffs.
What's he thinking there?
I think defensively, I've said it, I've banged the same drum over and over again. I think defensively they are a lot more vulnerable than the teams in and around them. I think if you're going into the top six, you need to be assured defensively. I think you make too many mistakes. So you're looking at the likes of West Brom if Leeds finish in the playoffs, and looking at Leeds as well. So teams, more favourable towards defensive teams for the top six, and Ipswich are not.
They've got Cam Burgess to come back from injury though, which I think could make a difference.
I'll throw in my little hot take that I kind of suggested at the start. Leicester don't win the championship. Wow. There we go. That's how we'll finish. Big one. I know. Might as well.
It's burning in here with that hot take.
Thanks very much for joining me, Gab and Justin. And that's all we've got time for today on the Sportsman Untitled. We'll see you next time.